Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this morning, and thank you again for the UK Pavilion team for having me. I'd like to start this morning with a very simple observation, and it's one thing that might feel slightly uncomfortable. Healthcare and MedTech are two of the most innovative sectors in the world, but they are also consistently some of the most conservative when it comes to how they explain that innovation. We build extraordinary things. We solve complex, high-stakes problems. We genuinely improve lives. And then we describe all of that in the safest, flattest, least human way possible. And that tension between innovation and communication is no longer just ironic. In 2026, it's becoming a growth problem. Because you're no longer just competing in a closed system. Your business is not just being compared to the organisation next door, or the company you've always benchmarked against, or the incumbent that you're trying to displace. You are being compared globally, instantly, and continuously. Your patients are now benchmarking you against software companies that prioritise usability and confidence. And investors are benchmarking you against organisations that can prove something very specific. Not just that their technology works, but that their technology is adopted. And here's the uncomfortable part. None of these groups are lowering their expectations just because healthcare is a complex sector. They understand the stakes. They understand that it's a difficult place to work in, but they still expect clarity. So today, I'd like to share 6 uncomfortable truths about healthcare and medtech marketing in 2026. I promise you, there'll be no predictions. We're not going to talk about trends. We're going to talk about truths that are already playing out, whether we acknowledge them or not. And after each one, I'll ask a simple question. Not a theoretical one, a practical one. Why aren't you doing this? So, truth number 1. If you don't prove trust, you don't deserve attention. In 2026, attention is going to be scarce, but trust will be the real currency. For a long time, MedTech brands relied on a familiar toolkit to establish credibility. A toolkit that included logos, credentials, accreditations, regulatory language, carefully worded claims. And for a while, that's worked. But credibility is no longer assumed. It has to be earned. And more importantly, credibility has to be earned over and over again. Because today, buyers don't want reassurance. They want evidence. Buyers want to see what actually happened, who used it, what changed, and what actually didn't go perfectly. And that evidence doesn't live in a single PDF or a polished launch story. That evidence shows up over time. In MedTech especially, trust is not created at launch. It's created after deployment. After the first real-world use. After the first objection. After the first workaround. And most importantly, after the first learning. And yet, many organisations that we see hesitate to publish early data. They hesitate to publish partial results, and they really hesitate to publish lessons that they've learned in the journey. And we know why, right? It feels risky. It feels exposed, because someone internally will usually say, let's just wait until it's perfect. But here's the reality. Your customers already see the imperfections. They just see them privately. They see them in pilot programs, early rollouts, and peer conversations. So the real question isn't, is it safe to prove trust publicly? It's this. Why aren't we proving trust publicly when our customers already expect it privately? So what can we do instead? Well, the strongest organisations that we see are already changing how they think about proof. They're not building case studies, they're not building trust libraries, they're publishing evidence in stages. They're building trust libraries. They're building early outcomes, mid-term impact, and mature adoption. They're putting clinicians, operators, and users front and centre. They're not using brand language. And critically, they're aligning marketing with clinical governance, not trying to work around it. Because trust in 2026 is not a campaign, it's an operating discipline. Truth number 2, your buyer journey is broken because you pretend there's only one buyer. Again, we all know in this room, healthcare and medtech decisions are really, really complex. We all know that. And yet, if we're honest, much of our marketing still behaves as if they're simple. We have one website, we have one headline, one value proposition, and one call to action. As if one single message could possibly serve everyone involved in a real healthcare buying decision. But we all know real decisions just don't work like that, and they never have. A typical decision today involves clinicians evaluating safety, efficacy, and clinical confidence. Procurement teams assessing cost, compliance, and risk. Executives thinking about scale, reputation, and long-term viability. And increasingly, patients and families looking for reassurance, clarity, and dignity. Each of those groups is asking a different question. Each of those groups is carrying a different risk. And each of them needs to believe something different before they move forwards. But when you speak to everyone at once, you don't sound relevant to anyone. You sound generic. You sound cautious. And worst of all, you sound interchangeable. In 2026, this mismatch won't just slow down growth, it will quietly kill it. Because complexity doesn't scare buyers. Irrelevance does. So the uncomfortable question is this: why are you still designing marketing around your internal structure instead of the actual buying reality? So where this usually breaks is that most organizations are designing their marketing around their product hierarchy, their service lines, their reporting structure, or their internal politics. They're not doing it around decision anxiety, professional risk, or confidence thresholds. And so, because of this, buyers are forced to do some of the work themselves. The buyers have to translate your message into something meaningful for their role. They have to fill in gaps that you didn't address. And they have to justify decisions internally using language that you never gave them. Every time that happens, momentum leaks out of the deal. So what can we do instead? Well, the high-performing brands out there at the moment are doing something very, very different. They're mapping decision journeys, not funnels. They stop asking, how do we move someone to conversion? And they start asking, what does this person need to believe next in order to feel safe moving forwards? They create distinct narratives for each stakeholder, not different taglines, but different proof points, priorities, and language. They time content to confidence, not quarters. Early stage education looks very, very different from late stage justification, and both really, really matter. They design experiences that reduce friction, not add noise. less content, more relevant, more clarity at exactly the right moment. And here's the key shift. They stop asking, what should we say? And they start asking, what does this person need help explaining to somebody else within the organisation? Because in healthcare, and we all know this, nobody buys alone. And marketing that understands that doesn't just inform decisions, it enables them. Truth number 3 for the AI experts in the room. AI will expose lazy marketing. It's not going to replace marketers. So it already is, but by the end of 2026, AI is going to be absolutely everywhere. Now, I promise no predictions in this. That isn't a prediction, that's just a baseline. Every organisation in this huge hall today will be using AI in some way, shape or form. Every agency you speak to will claim to be AI enabled. Every deck will have at least one slide about automation, efficiency or scale. But that's not the real disruption here. The real disruption is that AI will remove excuses. Now, average organisations use AI to produce more content, fill more channels, and increase output. They'll publish faster, post more often, and sound exactly the same as everybody else. Because AI doesn't magically create clarity. It amplifies whatever thinking already exists. Leading organisations will use AI very, very differently. They'll use it to understand hesitation, service objections earlier, predict adoption barriers, and personalise education responsibly. And here's the critical distinction. AI doesn't fix unclear positioning, it accelerates it. If your message is vague, AI will make it vague at scale. If your story lacks confidence, AI will repeat that uncertainty everywhere. And in healthcare, speed without clarity isn't just efficient, it's dangerous. Because the stakes are much higher. The consequences are real. And confusion erodes trust faster than silence ever did. So the uncomfortable question becomes this. Are we using AI to automate thinking, or are we using AI to avoid thinking? So where organisations generally go wrong is that most teams deploy AI before they've answered some fundamental questions. Questions like, what do we actually stand for? Who are we actually for? What problem do we solve better than anyone else? And where does hesitation actually come from? Because without those answers, AI just becomes a content machine, not a strategic tool. It fills space, sure, but it does not build confidence. So what can we do instead? Currently, the best healthcare and MedTech teams are being far more disciplined when it comes to AI. They're using AI for insight, not just output. They apply strict governance, clear rules, clear accountability, and clear boundaries. They train AI on real behaviour, not assumptions. Actual clinician questions, actual patient concerns, and actual objections heard in the field. And they use AI to support decision making, not overwhelm it. To simplify, to clarify, to reassure. Because in healthcare, the role of technology isn't to impress, it's to reduce anxiety. AI that adds noise will be ignored. AI that builds confidence will be trusted. And trust, as we've already said, will be the real currency in 2026. So truth number 4, MedTech brands will be valued on adoption, not innovation. We were actually having a conversation about this last night. So for a long time, innovation in healthcare has been a differentiator. If you had something new, something clever, something technically impressive, you had an advantage. That advantage is disappearing. Not because innovation isn't important, but because innovation is no longer scarce. And there's a few 100,000 people in this building that can prove that. Markets today are full of brilliant technology. We've got products that look impressive in demos, test well in controlled environments, win awards, yet still struggle to scale. In 2026, the organisations that win won't be the ones with the smartest technology. They'll be the ones that can answer 3 very simple questions. How quickly is this adopted? How easily does it integrate? And how confident is it championed internally? Because we all know adoption is really, really hard in any business. It requires behavioural change, workflow disruption, and actually it requires professional risk. And most marketing ignores that reality. So here's the uncomfortable question. Why are you still marketing innovation instead of marketing adoption? So where does adoption actually fail? So adoption very rarely fails because the product doesn't work. Adoption usually fails because people don't understand how it fits. They don't feel confident using it, or they don't feel supported once the sale is done. Too much marketing ends at the buy stage. But in MedTech, the real work begins after that moment. If clinicians feel abandoned after onboarding, if teams have to figure things out alone, if internal champions run out of air cover, adoption stalls. Quietly, politely, and really expensively. So what can we do instead? Well, winning MedTech brands are shifting their focus. They're marketing the change, not just the technology. They're showing what life looks like after adoption, not just what the product does. They support clinicians beyond onboarding, refresher education, peer stories, ongoing reassurance. They're creating enablement content, not just sales tools. They're creating content that helps users succeed. Content that helps champions justify the decision they've made internally. And content that makes the change feel manageable. And they treat the post-sale education as a growth lever, not a cost center. Because here's the real truth. Adoption does not fail in the product. It fails in the story around the product. And in 2026, that story will determine value far more than innovation ever did. Truth number 5. Outcomes will replace claims whether you are ready or not. The marketers in the room will know that healthcare marketing still really loves superlatives. We use words like leading, best in class, transformational, game-changing. They sound impressive, they look safe, and increasingly, they're ignored. By the end of 2026, buyers will have far less patience for claims that aren't anchored in reality. They're going to demand measurable impact, transparent benchmarks, and honest progress. Not perfection, progress. Because the market has matured. People understand that healthcare is complex. They accept that change takes time, but they no longer accept that marketing pretends otherwise. Outcomes-led marketing isn't about showing off. It's about credibility. And credibility doesn't come from saying that you or your product are excellent. It comes from showing what's actually improved. Even when the improvement was incremental, even when it came with trade-offs, and even when the story isn't perfectly tidy. So here's the uncomfortable question. What outcomes could you publish if you were brave enough to publish them? Now, this feels difficult, and most organisations hesitate here for understandable reasons. Reasons like data lives in different systems, cross teams don't agree on metrics, the early results feel incomplete, legal teams get nervous. And so the default response is always, well, let's just wait. But waiting has a cost, because whilst you're waiting to be perfect, someone else is out there being honest. And honesty builds trust faster than polish ever will. So what can we do instead? The leading organisations here are already making a clear shift. They're defining outcome metrics early, not as an afterthought. They're aligning marketing with clinical data, operational data, and commercial reality, not vanity metrics. They're sharing progress, not just success. What's improving, what's plateaued, and what's still actually being worked on. And they turn that improvement into part of the brand story, not as a weakness, but as a proof of seriousness. Because in a skeptical market, honesty doesn't undermine confidence, it creates it. Oh, two of us operating slides. There we go, thank you. Truth number 6, marketing leaders will either drive growth or be replaced. So this is probably the most brutal one that we've left till the end. So this final truth is an internal one, and it is probably the most uncomfortable truth of all this morning. In 2026, marketing leaders in healthcare and MedTech will face a clear divide. They will either influence growth strategy or be limited to execution. There will be no middle ground. I've always wanted to say that. The days of marketing as a support function are ending. Not because marketing wants more power, but because growth now demands it. Modern healthcare marketing must understand unit economics, support market entry, enable adoption, and prove commercial impact. Not in theory, in practice. So here's the question that every leadership team should ask. If marketing disappeared tomorrow, would our growth slow down? And if the honest answer is no, then the marketing team isn't being used properly. So a lot of organisations may struggle with this, and that's because a lot of teams still measure marketing by volume, activity, and visibility, not by confidence built, friction removed, or adoption accelerated. And as a result, marketing becomes busy, not influential. So what can we do instead? The high-performing organisations have already made a clear choice. They've tied marketing directly to adoption, to revenue, and long-term value creation. They're involving marketing early in product design, service design, and market strategy. And they're measuring impact beyond vanity metrics. And critically, they expect accountability. But they also give authority, because marketing doesn't need a bigger budget. Marketing needs a bigger mandate. So, in closing, I'd like to leave you with this. Healthcare and MedTech marketing in 2026 will not be defined by tools. It won't be defined by platforms or channels or how good your AI stack looks in a pitch deck. It's going to be defined by responsibility. Responsibility to earn trust, not assume it. Responsibility to respect complexity, not hide behind it. Responsibility to enable adoption, not just announce adoption. And the responsibility to prove impact, not just claim impact. The organisations that win in the next phase of healthcare growth won't be the loudest. They won't be the ones producing the most content or shouting the hardest about transformation. They'll be the clearest. Clear about who they're for. Clear about what problem they solve. Clear about what changes and what doesn't when someone actually adopts their solution. And they'll be the most credible, not because they're perfect, but because they're honest. Because they're willing to show progress, not just success. And because they understand that trust is built over time, not just at launch. And they'll be the most accountable. They'll treat marketing not as a decoration, but as an infrastructure. Not as a cost, but as a growth system. Not as something that makes things look good, but as something that makes growth possible. And here's the final thought that I'll leave you with this morning. The uncomfortable truths we've talked about today are not future problems. They're the present problems. The gap between organisations that adapt and those that don't is already widening. The question isn't whether healthcare and medtech marketing will change, because it already has. The question is whether you will change with it now or be forced to change later. And with that, I would like to say thank you very much. Thank you for your time this morning. Thank you for your attention, and thank you all for the work that you do in what is such an incredible sector where clarity truly matters. I'm Mark Robinson of the Wrap Brand Agency. I'm joined this morning by, you can give a wave, Kate, Becky and Erin. So if there's any questions you'd like to ask about any of the slides or would like a copy of the slides, then please feel free to grab one of us afterwards. Thank you very much.